The sound of clattering dishes echoed faintly through the silent mansion long before the sun had risen, a sound so out of place in the quiet hours of early morning that it made Ryan Hartman pause at the top of the stairs. It was 3 a.m., and his home, usually immaculate, serene, untouched by anything disorderly, felt strangely alive with the whisper of running water and hurried movement. When he descended the staircase, he expected perhaps a cleaner he had forgotten he scheduled, or maybe a noise from the kitchen appliances. But instead, he saw a small figure standing at the oversized sink, her tiny arms struggling to balance a stack of plates almost as big as her torso. The girl looked no older than 11, her dark hair tied into a messy knot, her oversized shirt damp at the sleeves as she scrubbed furiously, as if racing against time. And when she turned, startled, her tired eyes, far older than they should have been, met his. It was the moment that would change both their lives forever. If you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindly Tube. Your support helps us bring more stories that touch hearts and change lives. Ryan knew the girl. Her name was Mara Valdez, the daughter of his housemaid, Tessa. He had seen her a few times, small, polite, always quiet, usually doing homework in a corner while her mother worked. But tonight, the circles under her eyes looked harsh, and her hands shook as she gripped the sponge like she was clinging to survival itself. It bothered him more than he expected. This wasn't a case of a child doing chores for discipline, this was a child doing labor far beyond her capacity, at an hour when children should be dreaming peacefully in their warm beds. He spent hours that night awake, unable to shake the image of Mara fighting sleep, standing up, washing dishes that she shouldn't even have to touch at that hour. And when morning sunlight spilled across the marble floors of the mansion, he found himself scanning the staff quarters for Tessa. She arrived carrying a worn-out bag, her shoulders slumped as though every step cost her another piece of her strength. Ryan watched her, unsure how to approach what he had seen without sounding accusatory. But something in her trembling fingers as she buttoned her faded gray uniform told him that the truth, whatever it was far heavier than he imagined. He later learned from another staff member that Mara hadn't gone to school in days. Some whispered that she was sick, others thought she was helping her mother, a few thought perhaps Tessa wasn't the mother she appeared to be. Rumors swirled, but none of them matched the raw exhaustion Ryan had seen in both Tessa and her daughter. And as much as he hated intruding on the private lives of his employees, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. Ryan Hartman was a billionaire, but not the loud kind often seen on magazine covers or flaunting their wealth across the world. He built his empire quietly, starting from nothing, sleeping in a cramped room above a failing store he inherited from his father. He understood struggle, but he had never experienced the kind of quiet desperation he had glimpsed in Mara's tired eyes. It haunted him. For the first time in years, he found himself unable to focus on reports, meetings, and investments. That single image kept replaying in his mind, the girl washing dishes while the world slept. Days passed, and he noticed inconsistencies. Tessa worked longer hours even though she never asked for extra pay. Mara wandered around the staff area with a limp in her walk, as if every step hurt. Ryan watched from afar, not wanting to alarm them, but his concern grew. When he finally gathered the courage to ask about Mara's schooling, Tessa froze. Her lips trembled, and tears welled up in her eyes before she hid her face and whispered that everything was fine. But it was not. Anyone could see it. One afternoon, while checking security footage to understand why lights were turning on at odd hours, he saw something that shook him deeply. Mara was not only washing dishes at 3 a.m., she had also been cleaning hallways before dawn, picking up heavy bags of laundry, and helping her mother in ways no child should be responsible for. And then he saw something that made his chest tighten painfully. In one recording, Mara clutched her chest, wincing, struggling to breathe as she leaned against the wall for support before forcing herself to continue working. That was the moment Ryan decided he couldn't remain just an employer. He had to step in. He called Tessa into his office, and she arrived trembling like she expected to be fired. She clutched her hands tightly, her breathing unsteady, her eyes desperate and afraid. Ryan didn't raise his voice. He didn't scold or threaten. Instead, he asked softly, "Why is Mara doing this? Why isn't she in school? And why does she look so tired every single day?" The dam broke. Tears poured from Tessa's eyes as if they had been waiting years to escape. She sank into the chair and covered her face with her hands, her body shaking as she cried, not with embarrassment, but with the surrender of someone who had carried too much for far too long. Between sobs, she confessed everything. Mara had asthma, severe, unpredictable, frightening. Medical bills had piled up faster than she could pay them. She had been sending every penny she earned to treatment centers, clinics, and medication suppliers. Her husband had abandoned them 2 years ago, and she had been raising Mara alone since then, juggling debts, responsibilities, and fear that one day, she would lose her daughter because she couldn't afford another hospital visit. Mara had stopped going to school because they couldn't afford uniforms, supplies, or transportation anymore. And because Tessa was too overwhelmed, Mara insisted on helping after seeing her mother faint one evening from exhaustion. That night had terrified Mara so much that she refused to sleep when her mother worked late shifts. Instead, she stayed awake, doing whatever she could to reduce her mother's workload. She washed dishes, folded laundry, scrubbed floors, because she didn't want her mother to collapse again. She was only 11, but the world had forced her to grow far too fast. As Tessa spoke, Ryan felt something shift inside him. He had built empires, signed billion-dollar deals, and saved companies from collapse, but nothing had ever stirred him the way this mother's story did. He thought of his own childhood, the nights he cried silently because he didn't want his mother to hear him starving. He remembered watching his mother break down because she couldn't pay the landlord. Pain recognizes pain, and in that moment, he saw his own past reflected in the trembling voice of the woman before him. He wasn't a man who made decisions emotionally, but that day, he made one of the most emotional decisions of his life. He told Tessa she would never have to worry about medical expenses again. He offered to cover all of Mara's treatment, her schooling, her supplies, and anything else she needed. He insisted she focus on being a mother instead of breaking herself to survive. When Tessa collapsed to the floor sobbing and thanking him repeatedly, he gently lifted her up. He told her she didn't owe him gratitude, only the promise that she would take care of herself the way she took care of her daughter. In the following days, the mansion transformed into a place filled with hope. Ryan arranged for Mara to see a specialist who updated her medications and created a safe treatment plan. Soon after, he enrolled her in a reputable daytime school near the neighborhood, providing transportation so she wouldn't strain herself. Mara was hesitant at first, having spent so long believing that dreams were for other children. But when she put on her new school uniform and looked at herself in the mirror, her eyes lit up with a spark that had been missing for months. She started attending classes again, slowly adjusting to the rhythm of normal childhood. Ryan often found her in the mansion's garden in the afternoons, reading books or sketching under the sunlight while waiting for her mother to finish work. Her favorite subject was science, and she talked about wanting to become a respiratory specialist so she could help kids like herself breathe easier. The change in her was impossible to miss. Her smile, once rare and fragile, became more frequent. Her steps grew steadier. Her eyes brightened with possibility. And her mother, freed from the weight of impossible choices, began to smile again too. Even the staff felt the shift. The mansion felt lighter, warmer, as though the presence of hope had breathed new life into its walls. Ryan realized that sometimes, the smallest acts of compassion created the greatest transformations. Months passed, and Mara thrived in school, earning high grades and making new friends. She still visited the mansion regularly, greeting the staff with enthusiastic waves and surprising them with drawings or small crafts. She always thanked Ryan shyly when she saw him, but he told her she didn't need to. Helping her helped him too. It reminded him that despite all his success, the most meaningful things he could do had nothing to do with wealth, but with humanity. His mansion no longer felt empty or cold. The echo of loneliness that once filled the halls had been replaced with laughter from a girl who had once cried silently in the dark while washing dishes at 3 a.m. And one bright afternoon, as Ryan watched Mara chasing butterflies near the flower beds, he realized something profound. All his life, he had believed wealth was his greatest achievement. But now he understood the truth: compassion was far richer. Providing opportunity to someone who never had any, that was the real legacy worth leaving behind. If this story touched your